Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post. I am your host, Ghadi Francis, and over the next half hour, I will get you all the recent updates, news, developments in one of the world's most volatile regions, one that I call my home, West Asia. Before we dive into this week's episode, let's take a look at what's making the headlines across the region.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan denounces Sweden for allowing a protest where an Iraqi refugee burnt pages from the Quran. This is the second such incident, which has put the future of Sweden's NATO membership in peril. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has dropped a central element of the controversial judicial plan. The plan will no longer grant Parliament the authority to overturn Supreme Court rulings. Over 2,000 pilgrims suffer heat stress during the Hajj. Temperatures soar to 48 degrees Celsius as weather remained dry as thousands of Muslims gathered for the holiest time of the year. Some hope for the region. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says establishing diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel is difficult but possible, reasserting that Washington is pushing to normalize ties between the two countries.
Israeli and Palestinian defense ministers sat down this week to discuss the recent settler violence. Now, Israel says it intends to crack down on violent rampage, but with the stark divisions in the ruling coalition, is this even possible? In our next report, we show you how these settlements are refreshing horrific memories for Palestinians. Let's take a look.
It started as a normal summer evening for Amal Abdul Halim. She was doing homework at her house in Turmus Aya in West Bank when she suddenly got distracted. Amal heard the glass shattering and gunshots being fired. She and her siblings locked the front doors and they hid in a safe room in the house.
So during those moments we felt like they were breaking in and we honestly anticipated death. We were ready for them to march in and shoot us and kill us. That was what we thought was going to happen. We heard gunshots and windows breaking. It was terrifying. I've never experienced something like this in my life.
Hundreds of Israeli settlers rampaged through Palestinian towns in the West Bank earlier this month. People were killed and houses were burnt. Days after the attack, the Israeli government approved plans to build new settlement homes in the West Bank. US's repeated warnings. Washington has lately been openly critical of Israel's settlement policies. But on the ground, it's the same story. Using their superior might, Israeli settlers continue to push Palestinians back. Recently, about 6,000 new houses have been approved. In all, a trigger for fresh spiral of violence.
So during those moments, we felt like they were breaking in and honestly anticipated death. We were ready for them to march in and shoot us and kill us. That was what we thought was going to happen. We heard gunshots and windows breaking. It was terrifying. I've never experienced something like this in my life.
Over 700,000 Israelis now live in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, the two territories captured by Israel in 1967 and sought by the Palestinians for a future state. The international community, along with Palestinians, consider settlement construction illegal or illegitimate. They are also seen as an obstacle to peace and the two-state solution. Israel's government, which took office in late December, is dominated by religious and ultra-nationalist politicians. They are known to have close ties to the settlement movement. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich himself is a firebrand settler leader and has still been granted cabinet-level authority over settlement policies. It does not end here. Smotrich has vowed to double the settler population in the West Bank. On the other hand, senior Israeli and Palestinian officials met for a rare meeting this week. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and a senior Palestinian official discussed the violence in the occupied West Bank. Gallant's office said he offered reassurance about Israel's intention to crack down on Israeli settlers who have attacked Palestinian communities. The new Israeli government and its extreme settler approach has alarmed the West. It has reignited heated debates in the halls of the UN headquarters. The United States has expressed its reservation, while the European Union has made its stand very clear.
I remain gravely concerned by the escalating spiral of violence we are witnessing in the occupied West Bank. I condemn all acts of violence against civilians, including all acts of terror, which exacerbate mistrust and undermine a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The violence must stop, and all perpetrators should be held accountable.
It's very important to know this, that these were terrorist attacks committed by settlers to scare these people, to drive them away from their land. Let's recapitulate. This is an illegal settlement. These are legally property owned by Palestinians on their own land. And that's the reason why we're here.
This year has been one of the deadliest for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Additionally, this month saw a significant escalation in settler violence. At least 137 Palestinians have also been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank so far in 2023. While on the Israeli side, 24 people had been killed in Palestinian attacks.
Still talking about Israeli politics, a Hollywood twist has entered the reform row in Israel. Just as Netanyahu's cabinet was ready once again to present its bill in front of the Knesset, a hearing for his corruption case has resumed. Now, the Hollywood biggie is a new testimony from one of the main witnesses. He is a producer, an Israeli producer, and a friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. Our next report brings you all the details.
With dramatic moments worthy of one of his films, a top producer is being cross-examined in the corruption trial of Israel's prime minister, adding a Hollywood twist to the Israeli judicial overhaul row. The name Arnon Milchan has appeared on the credit rolls of big grocers Pretty Woman and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He is an Israeli billionaire who is now settled in the UK. Milchan is the key witness for prosecutors trying to prove that PM Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife are guilty of corruption. He faces charges of fraud and breach of trust in landmark cases that have cast a long shadow over Israeli politics. The prosecution has argued that in exchange for the gifts that included champagne, cigars and jewelry for the prime minister and his wife, Netanyahu helped the Pretty Woman producer with personal and business needs. Netanyahu has been accused of using his position to help Milchan with his US visa status and by pushing for legislation that served his business interests. The Prime Minister denies doing anything wrong, claiming he is the victim of a political witch hunt. This week, the big shot producer appeared before the court virtually. He conceded to offering champagne and cigars as gifts to Netanyahu, providing an unexpected diversion for holidaymakers. Milchan told the court that Bibi and he like to discuss history together. He called the bond close and brother-like. He even said that no one has an idea of what the two have done in secret for the country. Netanyahu's political adversaries have argued that he should not hold office while on trial. Some have even accused him of pushing the controversial judicial overhaul to break out of his own legal predicament. Last Sunday, the Israeli government reintroduced the judicial bill in the Knesset. The latest effort doesn't seek the kind of major overhaul the government tried before. one that led to months of furious street protests and a threat to the economy. But it may be the first of a series and could once again trigger unrest.
We oppose the process of the coup or the judicial reform. We think it is against democracy, and we think it is important to do it now because the negotiations for a compromise have exploded. So now is the time to express our protest.
To once again try to ruin the Israeli democracy by making horrible laws. That only goal is to destroy the democracy of Israel, to destroy any balance between the different branches of the government in order to make it a dictatorship at the end of the day.
6 Israeli protesters were arrested earlier this week following a rally outside the justice minister's home. Minister Yariv Levin is a confidant of Netanyahu. He is also a long-time critic of the Supreme Court. Levin unveiled the judicial overhaul days after taking office last December. He said the plan was needed to rein in an interventionist judiciary. The proposal in question seeks to chip away at a single doctrine which critics have long considered vague. It permits judges to dismiss an appointment or decision if it's deemed unreasonable. Israeli courts have used the reasonableness doctrine to bar convicted criminals from serving as ministers and to stop government regulations. Critics say the proposals undermine judicial independence, as Israel has no constitution and only one house of parliament that is controlled by the coalition. The overhaul has yet to become law, but it has already affected the currency. It has raised concerns among some Western allies about the health of Israeli democracy. The rival sides are digging in, deepening one of Israel's worst domestic crises. The protests have sent shockwaves through Israel and pose a serious challenge to Netanyahu.
From politics, let's talk about pride. In Turkey, the LGBTQ community held their Pride Parade this month, and with it came the annual crackdown. Now, what are the woes of the LGBTQ community in Turkey? Despite the fact that being gay is not illegal by law, what challenges do they face? We tell you.
Proudly holding their pride flags, chanting slogans of equality, marching across the main street. The LGBTQ community in Turkey hosted their pride parade this week despite a crackdown by officials. In the biggest Turkish city, Istanbul, hundreds of demonstrators marched along the upscale Nişantaşı neighborhood, a change from the iconic Taksim Square, the site of the iconic 2013 anti-government protests, where protests have now been banned. Over 100 people were arrested in the parade. Making his side clear, the mayor of Istanbul, Davut Gül, tweeted about the detentions. He said, "Our national future depends on keeping the family institutions alive with our national and moral values, and that they will not allow any activity that would weaken the family institution." This is the same rhetoric Turkey heard a couple of weeks back when President Erdogan was campaigning for a re-election. Despite the arrests and the crackdown, the activists are still standing strong.
They are afraid of something different to them, but I think there are many of us among them. They are aware of our strength and numbers. They are aware of change we can accomplish, but despite that, they refuse to communicate, and they are so afraid of us that they don't let us come out.
Regardless of the challenges and the detentions, this year's Pride March started and finished earlier than expected. There were no street clashes or police violence. What shined through was the resilience of the protesters, the people campaigning for a cause for recognition.
All day and night, I will be side by side with my LGBT friends. I will go to the police station and be there during their testimonies. We're here. I'm also here. I'm not dead. I'm still alive. If they wish to kill, they are welcome to. I know most of them want that, but there's a gay lawyer here.
Hem avukat hem gay bir insan var.
Last year, the US State Department released its human rights reports, where it noted that the LGBTQ community in Turkey experienced discrimination, intimidation, and violent crimes. In recent years, Erdogan and his government officials have intensified their anti-LGBTQ rhetoric in public. The rights and freedoms of the LGBTQ citizens became a lightning rod issue during this year's campaign. Ahead of the first vote and runoff which Erdogan won, he repeatedly attacked LGBTQ groups, even called them perverse. A crackdown on the community, demonizing their existence in public, even degrading their sexual orientation, has severely impacted the mental health of the community's young. Many of them have grown up under the AK party's rule, where facing questions and criticism has been an everyday struggle.
You are trying to erase me without any reason and without any justification. I feel deeply afraid. Feeling so afraid is affecting my psychology terribly. I couldn't breathe before, and now they will try to strangle my throat.
These people now fear persecution, they fear arrests and detentions. Some even consider leaving the country for safety.
Under a rule where being LGBTI plus is so criminalized, where people are treated as criminals just for their existence, people may seek asylum or go to study in countries that are relatively more free and where they do not have to hide their identities. But somehow I think that migration will increase. I had made a plan to migrate before the elections. I will move to the United States of America.
Turkey is predominantly Muslim society with a secular state. By law, it does not criminalize homosexuality, even has rules against discrimination, but reality plays out in a completely opposite manner. The community has struggled to find jobs, secure housing, even get quality healthcare in the country, while acceptance by friends and family remains among the biggest challenges they dare to undertake.
Now to the Gulf part of West Asia. Back from the COVID hiatus, Hajj pilgrimage has just ended. Over 2 million pilgrims, devout Muslims from across the world, visited Mecca in Saudi Arabia for the pilgrimage. Now the new twist is Iranians and Syrians were among these pilgrims. We tell you more.
Musayyad al-Sufi has spent years waiting for an opportunity to make the holy Islamic pilgrimage. For him, it was not financial or physical constraints, but a proxy war between third parties that left Musayyad and many such Yemenis bereft of the opportunity. A Saudi-led military coalition has been controlling Yemen's airspace since 2014. It came under them after the Iran-aligned Houthi movement took over Sana'a and ousted the Yemeni government back in 2014. Recently, Yemen Airways reached an understanding with Saudi Arabia. They were allowed to operate 4 flights during the Hajj season from Houthi-controlled Sana'a to Jeddah, which is the airport nearest to the holy city of Mecca.
When Sana'a airport reopened, we felt like we were part of the world. All people across the world need and benefit from such a means of air travel. We had been deprived of it for several years. We feel relieved. And praise be to Allah, always.
In March this year, the unprecedented happened. China brokered truce between regional foes, Saudi Arabia and Iran. If a landmark reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran has eased tension in the Gulf, clouds have also lifted at the Hajj pilgrimage, where Iranian visitors finally feel welcomed again. 7 years of enmity between the Sunni and Shia powers had made for a cool reception for the Iranian pilgrimage.
Iranian pilgrims who previously performed the Hajj used to tell us the situation was very difficult, especially when there was pressure from Saudi Arabia on Iran. But this year, it's good. Even Iranians living in our home country are talking about normalization of the two countries and the behavior of the Saudis. We behave ethically. They won't hurt us and we won't hurt them.
From Saudi Iran to Yemen talks and thawing enmity with Syria, the unimagined took the region by storm. Riyadh also ended tensions with Damascus this year. It was a big win for the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to return to the Arab fold. Reports say that Syrians will also be allowed to attend Hajj from next year. This after being barred from the pilgrimage for over a decade. Officials say there will be no Hajj pilgrimage for Syrians this year as relations have just been restored and the arrangements need time and coordination. While most Syrians will attend the Hajj next year, some of them who were wounded in the civil war were given special tickets and entry for the pilgrimage. For the second consecutive year, Prince Abdulaziz, the son of the late King Fahad bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, has sponsored about 500 Syrian pilgrims injured in the war.
I was injured in 2015 during an airstrike and had both my legs amputated. Praise be to God, I got the Hajj visa, something I never dreamt of receiving. Praise be to God, He blessed me with it, and today I'm at Mount Arafat.
This year's Hajj has ended. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Muslims are obligated to undertake it at least once in their lifetime. That is, if they have the means.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you always the most recent updates, news, stories and ground reports from one of the most volatile regions in the world. Until then, stay safe, keep on watching WION. I'm Ghadi signing off from Beirut, and you're watching WION, World is One.